Welcome to New Perspectives. I'm Casey Davis-Uchoke, and today we're taking a look at some of the most expensive mistakes ever made. These aren't those small slip-ups that fade away. They're failures that were investigated, written into reports, and came with price tags big enough to change how entire systems operate. What makes them so striking is how enormous the consequences were. We're starting this episode very far from Earth. The Mars Climate Orbiter was designed to do something extraordinary, become a weather satellite for another planet. Built for NASA by Lockheed Martin, launched from Cape Canaveral, and managed through NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, the spacecraft spent nearly 10 months traveling through space. Its mission was to study Mars's atmosphere and help prepare future landings. It was a flagship scientific mission involving multiple teams, contractors, and layers of oversight. By September 1999, the spacecraft was approaching Mars for orbital insertion, the most delicate moment of the entire mission. Engineers at NASA and Lockheed Martin were monitoring incoming data. Some trajectory numbers didn't line up perfectly with the expectations, but nothing triggered an immediate halt. No alarms and no emergency shutdown. The spacecraft continued its approach, and then it went too low. Communication was lost, and no explosion was observed. No final transmission was received. The spacecraft simply disappeared. The investigation afterwards found a simple problem. Lockheed Martin used imperial units, and NASA's software expected metric units. The numbers were never converted. That unit error meant the spacecraft's course corrections were slightly wrong throughout the journey. By the time it reached Mars, those small errors became catastrophic. The orbiter entered the atmosphere at the wrong altitude and was either destroyed or sent off into space. To this day, no one knows for sure. NASA estimated the total mission cost at $327 million. Years of work by NASA and Lockheed Martin vanished in a moment. Two parts of the same mission were speaking different measurement languages, and everyone assumed someone else had already checked. The next mistake cost tens of billions, and it all happened in under a week. On the morning of March 23, 2021, a massive container ship called Ever Given entered the Suez Canal in Egypt. The canal is one of the most important trade routes on Earth, handling about 12% of global commerce. Oil, food, electronics, medical supplies, all of it moves through this narrow stretch of water. Ships move continuously and schedules are really tight. There's no real backup route. That morning, strong winds and limited visibility pushed the Ever Given off course. The bow struck the canal bank. The stern swung across the waterway, and within seconds, the canal was completely blocked. Behind it, ships stopped moving. Then more ships arrived and stopped. Oil tankers waited, and livestock ships waited. Cargo vessels carrying everything from car parts to coffee beans sat idle. Within days, more than 400 ships were backed up at both ends of the canal. After about 6 days of digging sand away from the ship and failed attempts to move it, a higher tide finally gave crews just enough water to free the ship. The Ever Given was refloated, and global trade slowly began moving again. Economists began calculating the damage, and estimates put the value of delayed trade at about $9 to $10 billion per day. As the canal was blocked for nearly 6 days, that puts the total direct disruption at roughly $54 to $60 billion. And that number does not include weeks of port congestion, missed manufacturing windows, or price increases that showed up later. Our next mistake involves another rocket launch, but this one failed almost immediately and for a very different reason. Ariane 5 was ESA's next-generation rocket, bigger, more powerful, and designed to carry heavier payloads than anything before it. This was its first flight in 1996, launched from Kourou in French Guiana, carrying 4 scientific satellites meant to study Earth's magnetic field. Years of work led up to this moment. The countdown finished, and the rocket lifted off cleanly. Then 37 seconds after launch, the Ariane 5 began to tilt. The motion was subtle at first, but then seconds later, the rocket broke apart in midair and triggered its own self-destruct system. The mission was over almost as soon as it began. It turned out that it was a software flaw, nothing structural and nothing wrong with the engine. Engineers had reused navigation code from Ariane 4, an earlier rocket that had flown successfully for years. The software worked perfectly, but for Ariane 4. Ariane 5 flew differently. It accelerated faster, creating data values the older software had never encountered. Inside the rocket's inertial guidance system, one of those values became too large to fit into the memory space reserved for it. The software didn't know what to do with the number, so it shut down. Then the backup system shut down too, because it was running the exact same code. In an instant, the rocket lost accurate information about its position and movement, and the safety system did what it was designed to do. It destroyed the rocket before it could veer off unpredictably. The total loss was estimated at more than $370 million. The rocket, the payload, and years of scientific work gone in under a minute. The engineers knew the software came from Ariane 4. They trusted it because it had worked for years. What they didn't recheck was whether it still made sense for a rocket that flew differently. Next, we head to New York City. On August 1st, 2012, Knight Capital Group, one of the largest stock trading firms in the United States, turned on new software for its automated trading systems. This wasn't experimental, and it wasn't risky by Wall Street standards. It was meant to be a routine update to help the firm compete in faster markets. When the stock market opened that morning, everything looked normal. Then the computer started trading and did not stop. Here's what actually happened. Knight's system was designed to automatically buy and sell stocks at high speed, but part of the old software, code that was never meant to be active, was accidentally switched on in some of the firm's servers, but not all of them. That meant different computers inside the same company were following different instructions at the same time. Some servers began rapidly buying stocks, and others tried to sell them. The system did not recognize this as a problem. It just kept going. Orders flooded into the market at a speed no human could follow. Inside Knight Capital, traders and engineers watched their screens in disbelief. Numbers changed faster than they could read them. By the time they realized the system was out of control, stopping it wasn't simple. There was no single off switch. The software was already executing trades automatically, again and again. In just 45 minutes, Knight Capital lost about $440 million. Ultimately, the loss ended the company as it existed. The firm survived the day only after an emergency rescue, but the damage was permanent. Within a year, Knight was sold, absorbed into another company, and its name quietly disappeared from Wall Street. 45 minutes of bad software erased an entire major financial firm. Our final disaster happened in 2016, when Samsung launched the Galaxy Note 7. It was a flagship smartphone meant to showcase cutting-edge design and performance. Sales were strong, reviews were positive, and everything looked like a success, until reports began to surface of phones overheating, batteries failing, and devices catching fire. Here's what actually went wrong. Inside the Note 7 was a lithium-ion battery pushed to its limits. Samsung designed a thinner phone with a larger battery, leaving almost no room inside the casing. In some units, the battery cells were compressed just enough to damage the thin separators meant to keep positive and negative charges apart. When those layers failed, the battery short-circuited. Heat built rapidly. In some cases, the phone ignited. At first, the incidents seemed isolated. Then they weren't. Samsung issued a recall and pushed replacement phones to customers. Under pressure to move quickly, the replacements used batteries from a second supplier, and some of those batteries had different defects. The overheating problem appeared again. That's when the situation escalated. Airlines banned the Note 7 from flights. Passengers were warned not to turn the phones on, not to charge them, and not to bring them on board at all. Samsung halted production and made the unprecedented decision to permanently discontinue the product. The company later estimated that the total cost of the recall, shutdown, and lost sales was at least $5.3 billion. Afterwards, Samsung launched a months-long investigation, redesigned its battery systems, and changed how batteries are tested before release. In the years that followed, the company relaunched its flagship line without repeating the failure. Thanks for taking a look at the world's most expensive mistakes with me. We saw how small decisions and small oversights led to massive financial consequences. And I hope hearing about these blunders make you feel better about the small ones you've made today. And that's because, thankfully, most of us don't get the chance to lose billions. That's all for this episode of New Perspectives. I'm Casey Davis Uchoke. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay curious, keep discovering, and stay tuned to AFROTURK TV.